Hi everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. Today we have a neat GMC truck to diagnose. Look at this beauty. It's a 2003 GMC Sierra 1500 HD SC. Now that decal does look a little aftermarket. That's because there's something aftermarket under the hood. And these fender flares means it has QUADRASTEER. See the tie rods and the ball joints on the rear axle? Well, that's pretty neat. That still works. It only has 110,000 miles on it. So the owner is really meticulous about it. It's a really clean truck. And the customer complaint is it has a parasitic draw. He says that this truck has had this draw almost from the factory. The original owner was dealing with it when he bought the truck brand new, and now the current owner, he's taken it to dealers and shops, and no one has been able to track down this parasitic draw. He says that usually the battery dies in a few days, three or 4 days, so it doesn't seem like a huge parasitic draw, but it's consistent. So let's take a peek under the hood, see what we're dealing with here. Ooh, go fast goodies, supercharged, dang. So I asked him about this, like, has anything been tuned, anything aftermarket? He says yes, the engine computer has been tuned to run with a supercharger. There's an additional fuel pump, I think. And there are some add-ons on this truck. I mean, if you see, there's some wires. Obviously, this is the customer complaint right here. He always keeps it on a trickle charger. We have some relays, fuses, a lot of stuff. More fuses here. He said there's a snowplow controller and an aftermarket. Oh, let's see. Trailer brake controller. We got some cameras and more cameras. So definitely some aftermarket stuff, but he said that this drain was always there before he added any of this stuff. So let's not get too excited. I did scan the truck for codes. There were 0 codes stored in it, possibly because the battery, I don't know, died recently or something. But not worried about codes right now. We're just worried about the parasitic draw. So where would you start? First, we need to get an ammeter on this thing, and you can see that this is where the original battery is, and then I guess he added an extra battery right here. So positive, there's the ground cable that just goes to the body for extra battery capacity. So how do you hook up an ammeter when you have 2 batteries? Well, actually we're going to use this to our advantage, because whenever you hook up an ammeter to test for parasitic draw, you don't want to break the circuit, meaning you don't want to just take off the negative battery cable and install your ammeter. That might, power cycle modules. You might basically throw your test off, because we've seen in some previous case studies where you do a power reset on a module and it goes to sleep. But it doesn't go to sleep when you just turn the key off. That's very key. So I unplugged the negative battery cable here, but that battery's still plugged in, so the truck is still alive. So what I want to do is hook up an ammeter between here, and then we'll disconnect the negative terminal over there to eliminate that battery, and we'll use this battery to do our parasitic draw measurements. Let's get an ammeter on this thing. Alright, so ammeter's hooked up, and what do you see? 1.2 amps, and it's like dropping. That's not your parasitic draw, that's just that battery topping off this battery. They have to be, equalized. So that's why we have to disconnect this negative battery cable to eliminate this battery completely. Okay? Alright, well, 75 milliamps. Is that good? Is that bad? That's a little high. I'd like to see like 10 or maybe 20, but that wouldn't drain his battery down in 3 days, especially since he has 2 big batteries. You know, this would still be okay. So let me start the truck up and then put it back to sleep and see if something different happens. Because right now it's, you know, I'm not too excited about this. Alright, so I got that battery reconnected, and disconnect your ammeter before you try to start the truck because you'll just blow the fuse in here, most likely. Alright, let's see. That sounds pretty mean. It's probably got an aftermarket exhaust. Let's just make sure everything works. Wipers, HVAC, radio,
a place where you can use your gifts.
4-wheel steering. That's a cool button. I mean, this truck, like I said, it's clean. I'm sure if something didn't work, the owner would have fixed it. So, well, let's shut it off. Exit the vehicle. Hook up our ammeter again. Disconnect this battery. Alright, so we got 2.8 amps. So the truck is going to sleep. And these older trucks, you know, pre-CAN, pre-2007, they go to sleep very quickly. A few minutes, and it should be in deep sleep. I say 5 minutes. Give it 5 minutes just to be safe. So it's not a Volkswagen or a Ford with 4 networks that can take an hour to go to sleep. These things are a lot more efficient to diagnose these parasitic draws. So when the owner told me, you know, in 20 years no one's been able to figure this out, I'm like, yeah, sure, bring it over. It should be a walk in the park compared to, you know, that Volkswagen Touareg or these Ford or Lincoln MK whatevers that take forever to go to sleep. So 175 milliamps. Like I said, let's give it 5 minutes and we'll see if this draw goes away. Alright, it's been about 10 minutes. We're still right around that 170, 180 milliamps on the ammeter. So I think this is the parasitic draw right here. Almost 0.2 of an amp. That would, you know, definitely within a few days deplete these batteries to where the truck might not start. I have a little oscilloscope, 2-channel, connected to the class 2 data line at the DLC just to make sure there's no activity on the network, and it seems to be steady at 270 millivolts. I guess that's normal. So what's next? Some people might say take out your thermal camera. Well, with the thermal camera, if the draw is like over an amp, you might get lucky and find it. This is a 1/10 or 2/10 of an amp. Probably gonna, you know, not gonna find anything with a thermal camera. Let's do the classic check voltage drops on the fuses here in the underhood fuse box. Like I said, this is an older truck, doesn't have too many fuses, so it'll take a minute. At least check the accessible ones for voltage drop. see if we get lucky. All right, we're using the vintage Beckman Industrial ohm meter. Now set it to volts. We're measuring voltage drop. And let's just start with, just kind of be organized. You want to check all of them. Like, see, that one's 0. This one's 0. That one's 0. So let me check all these. If there's any non-zero voltage drops, we'll see what they are. Alright, so I checked all the mini fuses, and the only one that's not 0 is this 10 amp right there. 0.2 millivolts. Steady, constant. So I can, that's kind of reasonable if we have a 1/10 of an amp going through a 10 amp fuse. We'll have a small voltage drop. Now, which fuse is this? Let's take a look at our fuse box cover. And it's going to be 15, 10, and 10, and then rear wipers obviously blank. So HVAC ECAS 10 amp. This one right here. So, okay, we can look at a power distribution diagram, but for now, is it a good idea to just pull it and see what happens? If this was a modern car that takes an hour to go to sleep, absolutely not. However, since this is an old GM truck that goes to sleep in 5 minutes, even if we disturb the system, we can always put it back and recreate the problem. So I'm going to just pull it out. We'll see what happens on the ammeter. Okay, so it went down to 138. Anything happened on our scope? Oh, our scope went to 0 from 270 millivolts. Okay, that's actually very interesting. So let me give this like 5 more minutes. We'll see if this drops any further, or if we have another issue. So while we're waiting for the ammeter, let's do a little research online, not waste any time. Power and ground distribution. Where does that HVAC ECAS fuse go? So power distribution diagrams, you see there's 33 diagrams. And if you don't want to go through all of them, go to wiring diagram index and look for that fuse. It should be alphabetical, so HVAC. There it is, HVAC ECAS fuse 10. So diagram 1, 2, and 14. Okay, so back to our diagrams. Let's try 1. And it's going to be, there it is, HVAC ECAS fuse 10. Now, you see it's a hot at all times, so that's good to know. But where does it go? So for that, we need to go to diagram 14. HVAC ECAS, orange wire, HVAC control module. Okay, this is very nice because there's only one thing on that fuse, not like 10 things. That will cut our diagnostic time, drastically. So it looks like that's the keep alive power for the memory and the HVAC control module. Your whatever temperature you had dialed in, fan speed, all the settings. That's what keeps that memory alive. We can look at the HVAC diagram, the complete HVAC diagram. So vehicle diagrams, OE, go to heating and air conditioning, I think. Heating and air conditioning, and we have the automatic system, power, ground, serial data, yes. Alright, so hot and run, this is the ignition power, ignition voltage, and then there's our HVAC ECAS fuse, 10 amp, hot at all times, battery positive voltage. So it's 2 positive feeds. One's constant, one's ignition. And then there's the ground. It's on the serial network. So this is the fuse that we pulled. Interesting. This is almost reminding me of the Dodge Ram 1500 that we diagnosed recently that had almost identical problem. But in that case, the HVAC module was actually sending out signals and waking up all the other modules. That was a much harder diagnosis. In this case, it looks like just the HVAC module, for some reason, just draws a little bit of current. And you know, on the class 2, we didn't see a signal, but we saw that voltage was a little bit elevated. It was just constant. So let's see if our parasitic draw dropped at all. Hey, 35 milliamps. Okay, I like this. So it was only about 5 minutes since we pulled the fuse, and now we're down to 35 milliamps. So I think we're getting really close to making the call here on this HVAC control module. Just from these checks, we didn't tear the dash apart yet. Non-intrusive testing. Let's see what happens when we put this fuse back in. What will happen? We'll look at our ammeter and our scope. Okay, so you can see it started talking, and we're at 2.8 amps. Now let's see. Okay, we're back down to 300 millivolts constant, and let's see if, you know, if the draw goes down to 30 milliamps or 100. You know, there it is, 170. Oh, it dropped again. Back to 35. And look, right there, we're at 0. So this, again, is exactly like the Ram. Because when we power cycled the constant battery feed to the HVAC module, it actually went to sleep. That's apparently, you know, inside the module, whenever it gets a signal, hey, you got to go to sleep, or the ignition power goes away, it's supposed to go to sleep. This one's not. But after a power cycle, it's fine. So let's try to reproduce that one more time. I'm going to hook up that battery, start the truck, run it, you know, mess around with the HVAC settings, and then shut it off. We'll look at our ammeter. If we get another, you know, 180 milliamps that doesn't go to sleep, and if our class 2 line stays at 300 millivolts, we're going right after this HVAC module. Alright, so let's start up the truck again. I mean, we don't even have to start it up. So this is apparently the default setting. After resetting everything, it's an auto 74 degrees. So let's change the temperature, change the fan speed, and now shut the truck off. Close the door. Reconnect our ammeter. See, we're at 250 millivolts there. So that line is raised. Our draw is 2.8. Now I bet it's going to drop to 180 milliamps. And this is not going to drop to 0 until we pull this fuse out. No, now it's 75. It's either 75 or 180. That line is still elevated. And our voltage drop across the HVAC fuse is still 0.2 millivolts. Okay? So watch the scope. I'm going to pull this fuse out. Boom, right there. Instant drop on the class 2 line, and we're instantly down to 35 milliamps. So now we have all the evidence to tear off this dash, and well, I mean, the owner said whatever it takes to fix this truck. He loves this truck. He wants it all original. So we're not going to do any Russian bypass hacks where you connect the ignition power to the constant battery power. Then, you know, the HVAC will lose its settings. Again, not a big deal, but we have to get the part number off the HVAC module if we want to order a new one. So let's get inside the truck and see if we can locate that. So I'm a fan of these GM trucks because the dash comes off very easily. This whole trim piece is just clipped on. Not like a Ford where you're going to snap screws and stuff. And if you tilt the steering wheel down, tilt the shift lever down, this thing just comes right up. Park. Alright, so looks like 2 screws there. This module should pop right out. Alright, just 1, 2. This is one of my favorite tools. I use it every day, multiple times a day. The little Harbor Freight pick. It is amazing. Alright, let's get this sucker out of here. That's all it is. So I just want a part number off of this. There it is, model 15105215. This is the original unit, 09 June 03. So let's see if we can get a replacement. This component level repairs, I mean, there's something in there that's just not allowing it to go to sleep completely. Something in the chip. So we're not going to tear it apart or do anything like that. So just 2 connectors, super easy. Alright, so we have our 180 milliamp draw, 200 or almost 300 millivolts on the scope. Now instead of pulling the fuse, I just want to unplug the HVAC controller, because we've gotten burned by this before. Where, well, in this case it's a little simpler than the RAM, but remember on the RAM we're like, hey, this isn't even the HVAC module. The HVAC module lives over by the glove box. But I think this is the HVAC module. So we'll look at the scope while I unplug it, and we'll see what the parasitic draw goes down to. Well, I'll just focus you guys in on the scope and the meter. Now, can we adjust the brightness on this thing? Well, it's obvious. The line is above the middle. 175. I'm going to unplug the main connector on the HVAC module. Boom. Yep. That dropped down, and this dropped down from 180 to 140. It's about 40 milliamps. And it should go down to whatever, in a couple minutes it'll go down to 30 milliamps. Now I'm wondering if the aftermarket trailer brake controller, then there's this like charging pad that, you know, that's lit up, so I'm sure those are contributing to those 30 milliamps. If you didn't have any of those aftermarket accessories, we should be down less than 10 milliamps when the truck's fully asleep. So let's see when this times out if that goes to whatever, 30 milliamps. So I don't like that it's taking so long for this trailer brake controller to time out. It's still lit up even after 5 minutes. I'm just going to unplug it, see what happens. Alright, bingo. We're down to 35 milliamps. So this brake controller draws 100 milliamps for whatever reason, and I don't know how it's wired in or when it's supposed to go to sleep. Let's plug it back in. There you go, 138 milliamps. No trailer connection. Yeah, I know. So potentially two problems: HVAC module and this trailer brake controller. Like I said, these trucks are supposed to go to sleep within probably a minute. But at least we have a visual cue of when this thing is staying on. This display just keeps being lit up. So we'll order a new one of these. That's definitely a problem. And this could potentially be, I mean, I don't know how long it takes to time out, because it timed out before fairly quickly, within a few minutes. But now it's just staying on. So I don't know. Now I figured out how to adjust the brightness of the little oscilloscope. Settings, or display, you have to hit the plus. That's maximum brightness there. Okay, very cool. Should have done that before.